My name is Eleanor and I am 96 years old. I want you to listen very carefully for a moment. If there were a way for me to hand you back the years that people quietly waste after turning 50, believe me, I would give them to you without hesitation. But life doesn't work that way. Time only moves in one direction. What I can offer instead is something that took me decades to understand. Most of the things you are chasing so seriously right now will slowly lose their importance far sooner than you imagine. Not because you failed or because life went wrong, but because one day you finally see clearly what actually deserves your time and what never did. Age has a strange way of giving people clarity. When you're younger, everything feels urgent. Every argument matters, every comparison feels real, every achievement seems like proof that you're doing life correctly. But as the years pass, you begin to notice something surprising. Many of the battles you fought so hard were never worth fighting at all. If you stay with me for a while, I want to share something that might save you years of unnecessary stress. Before we continue, let me ask you something. If you're watching this right now, how old are you? Are you already past 50, or are you approaching that stage of life? Write your age in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I read as many comments as I can, and it's always fascinating to see people from different parts of the world sharing the same questions about life. Over the years, I have noticed 7 things that become an absolute waste of time once you reach the second half of life. The first one is something many of us were trained to do from childhood: competing with everyone around you. When we were young, life was built around competition. School grades were compared. Careers became races. Promotions, salaries, houses, vacations, everything turned into a scoreboard. You were always measuring yourself against someone else. For a long time it feels normal, but sometime around midlife, something strange begins to happen. You look around and realize that everyone is running in completely different directions. One friend is chasing financial success, another is focused on family. Someone else is searching for peace, travel, or personal freedom, and suddenly the race stops making sense. I remember a man named Daniel who lived in my neighborhood when I was in my 60s. Daniel was 58 years old and still obsessed with proving he was more successful than his classmates. Every time we spoke, he talked about who bought a bigger house or who retired earlier. But one evening he admitted something quietly. None of those achievements actually made him happy. He just didn't know how to stop comparing himself. Tell me honestly for a moment. Have you ever compared your life to someone else's and suddenly felt like you were behind? If that has ever happened to you, just type yes in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people understand that feeling. The truth is, comparison is exhausting because everyone is living a completely different life story. Someone might look successful on the outside but feel deeply lonely. Another person may have less money but more peace than you can imagine. Once you reach 50, the smartest competition you can have is with your past self. Are you wiser than you were 5 years ago? Are you calmer than you used to be? Are you closer to the kind of person you wanted to become? If the answer is yes, then you're already doing better than most realize. The second thing that quietly wastes years of life is tying your entire identity to your career. For decades, society teaches us that our job title defines us. People ask, "What do you do?" as if that single answer explains everything about who you are. My neighbor Richard struggled with this when he retired at 62. For almost 40 years, he introduced himself as an architect. It was the first thing he said when meeting anyone new. But after retirement, he felt strangely lost. When someone asked about his work, he didn't know what to say anymore. Without realizing it, he had allowed his profession to become his entire identity. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Careers end, companies move on, titles disappear, but you still remain. Let me ask you something important. If someone asked you to describe yourself without mentioning your job, what would you say? Think about that for a moment. And if you feel comfortable, share your answer in the comments. It's actually a powerful exercise. Life after 50 becomes more meaningful when you begin rediscovering parts of yourself that existed long before your career started. Curiosity, creativity, learning new skills, helping others. The second chapter of life isn't about climbing higher on a ladder. It's about discovering depth. The third thing that wastes an incredible amount of time is forcing yourself to finish things that no longer serve you. Many of us were raised with the belief that quitting means failure. Finish what you start, people would say. Don't give up. And while perseverance is valuable, there's another side to that lesson that nobody talks about. Sometimes finishing something is simply stubbornness disguised as discipline. I remember when my friend Margaret decided to join a painting club in her late 50s. She thought it would become her passion, but after a few months she realized she didn't actually enjoy painting at all. Still, she kept going for almost 2 years because she didn't want to feel like a quitter. 2 years. 2 years spent doing something she didn't enjoy, simply because she thought she had to. Have you ever done something similar? Maybe finished a book you didn't enjoy, stayed in a group that drained you, or continued a project that no longer mattered. If that sounds familiar, write "been there" in the comments. One of the greatest lessons age teaches you is that time becomes extremely precious. After 50, you begin to understand something younger people rarely think about. Your time is not unlimited anymore. Every hour you spend forcing yourself through mediocre experiences is an hour you could have spent doing something that actually brings joy. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to change direction. And walking away from something that no longer fits your life is not failure. Sometimes it's wisdom. Another surprising waste of time later in life is doing things simply because you feel you are supposed to. This one is incredibly common. People attend events they don't want to go to. They say yes to favors they secretly resent. They keep commitments that drain their energy because they're afraid of disappointing someone. My cousin Helen spent years attending social gatherings that left her exhausted. Every weekend she would visit people out of obligation, not because she truly wanted to be there. One day she told me something that stuck with me. She said, "I realized I was living other people's expectations instead of my own life." Let me pause here and ask you something important. Do you sometimes say yes to things even when you really want to say no? Be honest with yourself. And if you want, write "yes" too often in the comments. Kindness and generosity are beautiful qualities, but there's a difference between genuine kindness and people-pleasing. One comes from choice, the other comes from fear of rejection. As the years pass, you learn that giving your time should come from a place of genuine intention, not quiet resentment. Because when you give freely, it feels fulfilling. When you give out of obligation, it slowly drains you. And life is far too short to spend it feeling trapped by expectations you never chose. My friend Thomas used to say something that sounded simple at first, but carried a lot of truth. He would say, "The older you get, the more you realize peace is more valuable than proving a point." I didn't fully understand what he meant until I watched people waste enormous amounts of energy trying to be right. That brings me to another thing that quietly steals years of life after 50: the constant need to be right. When people are younger, arguments can feel important. Winning debates feels satisfying. Whether it's about politics, opinions, family disagreements, or even strangers on the internet, many people spend hours defending their viewpoint as if their dignity depends on it. But here's something you slowly notice with age. Most arguments are not actually about truth, they're about ego. I once knew a man named Victor who loved debating with anyone who disagreed with him. Family dinners would turn into long arguments. Online discussions would last for hours. He believed that if he explained things well enough, people would eventually admit he was right. But that rarely happened. Instead, conversations became tense, friendships became strained, and Victor often walked away frustrated. One evening he told me something interesting. He said, "I spend all this time explaining things, but nobody ever changes their mind." That's when it finally clicked for him. Many people are not listening to understand. They are listening to respond. And once you realize that, something shifts inside you. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in an argument where both people kept talking but nobody was actually listening? If that sounds familiar, write "true" in the comments. I promise you're not the only one who has experienced that. After 50, something very liberating happens when you stop trying to win every argument. You begin to choose peace instead. You learn that not every opinion needs a response. Not every disagreement needs a debate. And sometimes the wisest thing you can say is nothing at all. When you stop chasing the last word in every conversation, you gain something far more valuable: your peace of mind. Another major drain on your time and energy comes from people who constantly take more than they give. You probably know the kind of people I'm talking about. They only call when they need something. Every conversation somehow becomes about their problems. When you spend time with them, you leave feeling emotionally exhausted rather than uplifted. These people are often called energy vampires, and the name is surprisingly accurate. I had a colleague years ago named Laura. She was kind and generous, but she had a habit of surrounding herself with people who constantly leaned on her for support, without ever offering any in return. Whenever they had a crisis, Laura was the first person they called. But when she needed help, suddenly everyone was busy. For a long time, she convinced herself that she was simply being supportive. But one day she admitted something difficult. She felt drained all the time. Let me ask you something personal for a moment. Do you have someone in your life who leaves you feeling tired every time you talk to them? You don't have to mention names, but if you understand what I mean, just write "I know someone like that" in the comments. Recognizing these patterns is not about judging people. Many of them are not bad individuals. They may simply be unaware of how much they rely on others. But the truth is, your energy becomes more valuable as you get older. After 50, you begin to realize something important. Your emotional energy is a limited resource. You cannot give it endlessly without consequences. Every hour spent with someone who drains you is an hour not spent with someone who encourages you, inspires you, or simply brings a sense of calm into your life. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is create distance. You don't have to be unkind. You don't have to confront them aggressively, but you are allowed to protect your peace. Because the relationships that truly matter are the ones where both people give and receive, where conversations feel balanced, where you feel appreciated rather than used. Now we come to something that many people struggle with accepting in the second half of life, expecting people to become someone they have repeatedly shown they are not. This lesson can be painful because it often involves people we care about deeply. For many years, we hold on to hope that someone will change. Maybe it's a friend who constantly breaks promises. Maybe it's a relative who never respects boundaries. Maybe it's someone who always says they will improve but never actually does. Hope can be a beautiful thing, but when hope ignores reality, it becomes a trap. I remember a woman named Caroline who spent nearly 20 years hoping her brother would eventually become more responsible. He frequently borrowed money and rarely paid it back. Each time he apologized and promised things would be different, and every time she believed him. Eventually, Caroline realized something difficult but important. Her expectations were reasonable, but her belief that he would suddenly become a different person was keeping her stuck in disappointment. Have you ever experienced something similar? Maybe you kept hoping someone would change even though their behavior stayed the same year after year. If you've ever been in that situation, write "I've been there" in the comments. One of the most powerful forms of clarity comes when you finally accept people as they truly are. This doesn't mean lowering your standards. It doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or dishonesty. It simply means seeing reality clearly. When someone repeatedly shows you their character, believe what you are seeing, because the real freedom comes not from forcing others to change, but from deciding how you will respond. Sometimes that means adjusting your expectations. Sometimes it means creating healthy distance. But either way, it allows you to stop fighting reality. And the moment you stop fighting reality, life becomes a little lighter. There is something interesting that happens as you grow older. At first, you think wisdom will arrive in some dramatic moment, like a sudden revelation that changes everything overnight. But in truth, it comes quietly. It arrives through small realizations, repeated experiences, and moments where you finally see patterns that were always there. By the time many people reach their 50s or 60s, they begin to notice something important. Life becomes less about adding more things and more about removing the things that never truly mattered. When I look back over my own life, the greatest sense of peace did not come from achievements, recognition, or proving anything to anyone. It came from simplifying where I placed my attention. And that's why the last lesson I want to share is perhaps the hardest one for many people to accept. Expecting life itself to follow the plan you imagined. When we are younger, we create detailed pictures of how our lives should unfold. We imagine what success will look like, how relationships will turn out, how our families will grow, and how the future will reward our hard work. But life rarely follows those neat and tidy expectations. A man I once knew named Samuel spent most of his adult life believing that if he worked hard enough, everything would eventually fall into place exactly the way he planned. He worked long hours, postponed vacations, delayed time with friends, and always told himself that one day he would finally relax and enjoy the results of his effort. But when he finally retired at 65, he realized something unexpected. Many of the people he had planned to spend time with had moved away, become busy with their own families, or simply grown distant. The future he imagined had quietly changed while he was busy preparing for it. Now, this doesn't mean hard work is meaningless or that planning for the future is foolish. Of course, those things matter. But the mistake many people make is believing that life will reward them exactly according to their expectations. And when it doesn't, they spend years feeling disappointed or cheated. Let me ask you something for a moment. When you think about your life today, is it exactly the way you imagined it 10 or 20 years ago? If your life has taken unexpected turns, write "Life surprised me" in the comments. You'll probably notice many others saying the same thing. One of the greatest forms of peace after 50 comes from accepting that life will always include unpredictability. Plans change, people change, circumstances change. And sometimes the most meaningful experiences appear in places we never planned to look. Instead of fighting these changes, wiser people learn to adapt to them. They begin asking a different question, not "Why didn't life go exactly as I expected?" but "What can I still create with the life I have today?" That shift in thinking changes everything, because the second half of life is not about chasing a perfect plan anymore. It is about living with intention, spending time with people who truly matter, exploring interests that bring genuine curiosity, protecting your peace instead of proving your worth, and appreciating moments that younger versions of ourselves were too busy to notice. I often sit on my porch in the late afternoon and watch the sunlight change across the trees. When I was younger, I would have considered that a waste of time. There was always something more productive to do, somewhere more important to go. But now I understand something that took decades to learn. A meaningful life is not built only through achievements. It is built through attention. Where you place your attention every day slowly shapes the quality of your life. If your attention is always focused on competition, arguments, comparisons, and expectations that may never be met, life begins to feel heavy and exhausting. But when you focus on presence, gratitude, curiosity, and relationships that bring warmth into your life, something very different begins to happen. Life feels lighter, not because problems disappear, but because your energy is no longer scattered across things that were never worth your time. Before we finish, I want to ask you one final question. Looking back at everything we talked about today, which of these lessons feels the most real in your life right now? Is it learning to stop comparing yourself to others, letting go of arguments, protecting your energy from draining relationships, or accepting people as they truly are? Take a moment and share your answer in the comments. Your experience might help someone else who is struggling with the same thing. And if you've reached this part of the video, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. Time is one of the most valuable things any person can offer, and I never take that lightly. If something in this conversation resonated with you, consider liking the video so more people can discover it. And if you enjoy reflections like this about living the second half of life with more clarity and peace, you're always welcome to subscribe and join us again. Remember this. Life after 50 is not a slow ending. It is a powerful opportunity to live more honestly, more peacefully, and more intentionally than ever before. And sometimes the greatest wisdom is simply knowing what is no longer worth your time. Thank you for listening, and I hope your next chapter becomes the most meaningful one yet. The third thing that wastes an incredible amount of time is forcing yourself to finish things that no longer serve you.